Hi, this is the Social Gelo with Angelo show. My name's Angelo. I'm a social scientist, surfer, martial artist, and a whole lot of other things. Coming to you live from Kasai City, Japan, the Social Gelo with Angelo show. Hey, what's up, y'all? Thanks for checking out Social Gelo with Angelo. This is part of the Kajukenbo series, and I'm going to be interviewing Eric Coleman, and you'll check that out when I reintroduce this video in the interview in a sec. If you want to support the show, simply subscribe on YouTube. If you're listening to this from iTunes or any other website, just go to YouTube, Social Gelo with Angelo, hit subscribe. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers right now, and that would be greatly appreciated. All right, stay tuned for the show. Awesome. We're getting started with the show. So today I have Eric Coleman. He's a Kajukenbo practitioner. And this is part of the Kajukenbo series. Eric, thanks for being on the show, brother.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem at all. No problem at all. I guess just to open things up, and I always say this at the beginning of all the Kajukenbo series. I always say, I don't care about rank. I don't care about rank. I don't care much for titles. Anybody who's trained with me out here in Japan, the only people who call me Sifu are the American folks that train with us because they follow that system. And back in the U.S. they call me Sifu. Over here they just call me Sensei. I'm not big on this stuff, but I always do ask because we do have a lot of Kajukenbo practitioners listening who do care, and there's nothing against that. So I guess just to get started, what's your title and rank in Kajukenbo?
I am a sixth degree, and I guess that's Sigung.
Nice.
It's interesting that you started out that way because we just had a meeting with the KAA and some of the higher up black belts, and one of the great grandmaster Chavez was saying to us that we need to all start using titles because I'm like you. I don't really care too much for it almost feels a bit silly to me, but at the same time, there's something to be said about tradition and respect. So yeah, I'm still on the fence about it, but I get you.
Yeah. So you Sigung. And just to clarify, because I know some people might not, like, there's two camps right now. There's a camp, there's the old school camp from Hawaii that feel that the mainland is what brought in a lot of the titles. And then there's a story that I don't know, you know how it is with martial arts, everything's like verbal history, right? Oral history, handed down oral history. And you know how things get with oral history. It's really hard to figure out what the original story was. And I was told that back in the day, and I know I'm going to get a lot of shit for this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I was told that back in the day, the titles were minimal. Like there was chief, and I think that was it. I think it was like chief and grandmaster, maybe. I don't think they had.
I don't even think there was grandmaster. I think there was like chief and professor.
That was it.
Yeah.
That was it. It was chief and professor. There was no grandmaster, and that other stuff kind of came in when Kajukenbo integrated a little more with the Ed Parker Kempo people, and like that's where a lot of that stuff came from. I don't know. I'm young and I wasn't there, so I don't know.
I mean, we're all kind of cousins in this, and I've heard similar stories even recently. And like I said, when you talk to someone traditionally that like the Chinese usage of the term sifu and sigang and all these other things, I heard, and I could get in trouble, but who cares? I heard that we were using them incorrectly anyway. So, for example, your students call you Sifu, which means teaching father. And then Sigung means your teacher's teacher, right? So, my students, if we were using it correctly, my students would always call me Sifu, and my students would then call me Sigon. So it's, you know what I'm saying? It's like your father can never be your grandfather, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I just it's convoluted
No, it
in all
is.
its
It
senses.
is. What made me feel the most amount of shame in this conversation, and I think it's kind of cool to open the podcast with this conversation. I wasn't planning on it, but here we go. Um, was when I traveled to Japan and I started meeting actual Chinese people who practice kung fu
Right.
that speak English, and I said, well, I do martial arts, and like, oh, so like, what's your title? It's like Sifu, and they laughed at me.
Because you said it wrong. Because
No,
you.
no, not even because
Uh,
I said it wrong. They knew what I was saying, and they spoke English, and
uh,
I said, okay, why? And we were friends. I'm friends with this guy, right? And I'm like, why
uh,
are you laughing? He's like, he's just, I'm sorry. He's like, I'm sorry. There's just no way you could be a Sifu in China. It's just not. It's not possible. Like,
yeah.
because like according to their very traditional, the way they practice, like some kung fu or many of the kung fu schools out there, is Sifu is the like head person. There can only
Uh,
be one Sifu, and I don't know if that's it for all the styles, but for many of the styles, there can only be one Sifu, and everybody else has some other name that he explained to me.
right.
But like,
Right.
yeah, so yeah, he found it funny that I'm a Sifu. He's like, and all the Sifus are like really old people, and then there'll be some schools will have like a Sifu and then maybe a master, maybe. But like for
Yeah.
their Chinese terms, like he found it. He said it was cute in his words. So, so I'm like,
I
this
mean,
did this motherfucker just call me cute? Like,
yeah. I mean, that's what I mean. It's like we take these terms and this culture, and then kind of use it for our own devices, so to speak. And it's like, okay, are you really using the culture? I mean, it's weird. It's like, are you just like taking somebody's culture and kind of bastardizing it and watering it down and all this other stuff? So yeah, I take all of that with a grain of salt.
yeah, that's how I am too, and that's like I've never really explained why I'm so reluctant to ask the question. Like I always say, I'm reluctant, and I go on this whole like political, what's like tightrope verbal
Yeah,
judo to try to make sure that I don't offend each camp. But I never really talked about
yeah.
why I felt that way. After that, I just told all my students over here who asked me the same question in Japanese. I'm like, you just call me. We're in Japan. Call me sensei. That's cool.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really care. I'm like, if I offend you, I'm sorry, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
We're all adults here.
So, um, how did you end up getting into Kajukenbo? Wow, what was your origin story, if you will?
My origin story. So, as you know, I studied under Rana Stellar. Um, so when I was a kid, I have three brothers. I am the third of four, um, and my mom used to send us to the boys' club in San Leandro. And this was I started in second grade in Taekwondo. Um, my mom put us into this Taekwondo class in the boys' club, and the teacher ended up being kind of a jerk of a guy and ran off with some money and left us there stranded. I don't even remember much of the Taekwondo, but that was the start of it. And then a couple of years down the line, they had a jujitsu class at the boys' club, and we did that for a couple of months. And that guy ended up leaving and kind of left us high and dry. And then along comes Ron Stellar, and I started with Ron when I was about 10 years old, um, and it stuck. I've been riding with him ever since. I'm 45 now, so 35 years.
Wow, nice, nice. And that's in I think I mentioned this before to my listeners when I interviewed. um, Ron earlier, but that's in That was originally in California, right?
Correct, California.
All right, cool, cool, cool. And I guess you kind of came in doing a little bit of Taekwondo, a little bit of Jiu-Jitsu, and then you were 10.
There was absolutely no like there was nothing there left from the the taekwondo or the
Oh,
jiu-jitsu.
it was like
Like
starting over again then.
yeah, it was pretty much a clean slate. And I'd stopped with Ron for about 3 years, I want to say, because my mom got tired of taking us. Um, so I went all throughout junior high, and then I stopped in high school. And then when I was able to drive myself, I went. That was like one of the first things I did was go back to Kajukenbo. And that was almost like starting. I think I stopped when I was like a yellow belt, or I believe, and then came back and was steady for the next, 10, 15 years or so.
Oh, okay. And what brought you back? What got you into martial arts training in the first place? I mean, obviously, like you start at 2, so I'm guessing that
No, second grade, not two.
second. Oh, okay, second grade. Okay, okay. I was like, someone really wanted you to start young. I mean,
Yeah.
even second grade though, like, was it something that you were interested in, or was someone else influencing you, or what made you want to train?
Um. Honestly, it was karate movies. Like, but in the '80s, we were heavily into the old school karate dubbed movies, and my oldest brother, was seriously into them. And I wanted to be like I wanted to be like my brother, basically. Um, but yeah, we were really into the karate movies, and my mom was the one that kind of put us into it. Like I didn't really know exactly like what it was, or it was just something to do. But yeah, then when I went back after when I was able to drive myself, it was kind of a nostalgia thing. It was like when we used the word ohana in Kajukenbo, it really like we were all like there was a bunch of kids, we're all kind of the same age, and we all hung out together, and it was something fun. It was something that we had this camaraderie, and I missed that, and I enjoyed it, and I'd always liked it. I just it was just one of those things. I don't know. I can't really even explain the draw that well. It was just something that I wanted to do, and said, okay. As soon as I am able to take myself, I'm going back.
And what were no matter how cheesy this may be, what were some of those karate movies that really
Oh
made you feel like
man,
you saw it and you're like, that's I want to do that. Like, of course, your brother was you want to be like your brother, but I'm sure your brother showed you a movie or two that you were like, ah, I want to be like that or that.
uh,
That's the one that's really influencing me.
I don't even remember all the names, but some of the popular ones were Five Deadly Venoms. I think there was one Big Axe, Little Axe, and Drunken Masters, and there was, I mean, it was all of them. Like when I grew up in the Bay Area, there was a guy named Tat Mao Wong, and he was a kung fu guy out of San Francisco, and he used to have his own like kung fu theater late night Saturday nights to show kung fu movies, and it was we would stay up late on Saturday nights and watch them, and that's just what we did.
That's
And
really
I had
cool.
cousins. It's funny because I had cousins that never took a lick of martial arts. One of my cousins in particular, and swore up and down he was like he was like a karate master for for watching those karate movies. We laugh about that to this day. Oh my gosh, he swore you could not tell him he wasn't a ninja. Like you couldn't tell him.
Yeah, yeah. Those are, I mean, I watched a lot of those movies too, so that's why I'm asking. Like
Right.
some of my favorites were like, yeah, Drunken Master. Um, There was what was that one with Jet Li back in the day? Was it called Shaolin?
Mm.
The stories of I forgot the name of the main character, but yeah, those are good. Those are classics. Those are classics.
Yeah, there was one that I can't remember the name of it, but the two characters were Big Axe and Little Axe, and I used to love that movie. Used to love that movie. Gosh.
Yeah, those are all part of those old school series. Wang Fei Hung. That was the story
Mm.
that they always talk about was Wang Fei Hung. Yeah, yeah. So you got influenced by those old school karate movies and kung fu movies. Started training, took a break, on and off. You finally came back because, like as you mentioned, it was that feeling of ohana that Kajukenbo has, that feeling of family. And how was the training? What was the training like?
Um, it was always a love hate relationship. I tell the story. So you met my instructor, Rhonda Stellar.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
what you do not know is that the Rhonda Stellar you talked to that day was not the Rhonda Stellar that I grew up with. So he, there's two things. There's a few things that kind of remind me of that that era. It was the soft Adidas. I'm not Adidas. Reeboks. When Reeboks first came out, Ron used to wear those while we were training, and there was plenty of days when we left. Mind you, we are 10, 11, 12-year-old kids. There was plenty of days when we left with Reebok prints like tattooed somewhere on our body. Like that was just a given. And he was probably I can't remember. Like, so he's 20 years older than me. So he was in his 30s or so, and um, we would hate it when every once in a while there would be some lady that walked in, some girl that walked into the class, and we would look around and be like, "That's not somebody's mom. We're in trouble." So if a woman walked into class and it wasn't somebody's mom, we knew that they were probably a friend of his, and we were about to get the crap beat out of us just just because he would be showing off, and it never failed. Like we would be like, oh no, here we go. And there was one time my we were sparring, and I'm a tall guy. I was tall for my age, and um, we were sparring, Ron and I, and I couldn't have been more than a yellow belt, and I landed a kick to the face on him, and every kid in that class was like, "Ooh!" And my mom was sitting there watching the class, right? And so it was like one of those moments in like slow motion where you see the kick land, and I was like, I don't believe I just did that. It was like when you like, almost like you think of the movies when they pan into somebody's face and they're just like a frightened, horrified face, and he was like, no, good kick, good kick, good kick, and because my mom was sitting there. The next class when my mom wasn't there, he beat the crap out of me. Like, like just totally just smashed me. So I always laugh now because he's so much of a more gentle soul. And it's funny because I'm like, he'll say something or do something if I'm there. I'm like, who are you? And what did you do with my instructor? Because this is not the same person Like you were absolutely not the same person. Like not at all. Like so so I don't. I say all that to say I don't know what was wrong with me for going back. It was there was something there. I don't know.
Uh, there, I guess this ties into a question that I didn't put in here, but have you, because you've been training for a while, right? You've been training for a long time. Have you
Hmm.
noticed a difference in the way martial arts has been taught from when you started into now? Like when you observe classes and when you see not just your instructor, but in general, like in general.
Yes and no. I, I so the instructors that I've been around for the most part, with the exception of Ron. So I've been around a few instructors, and yes, they kind of had to reel it in a little bit because of legalities and insurance and all this other stuff. But at the same time, I've dealt with instructors that like don't really care. Like and but at the same time, I look at other styles and I've seen other classes where the instructor were like safety and I don't know. It's hard to explain, but it's not. I felt like it was a watered down version of what it should be, and I feel like there. I've seen classes where they don't necessarily prepare anybody for violence, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that I feel like it does their students a disservice because I trained under Melchor Chavez when I moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico to be a kickboxer and Muay Thai fighter, and he of course is in the Kajukenbo Gaylord method also, and his brother is Andy Chavez, and Sifu Andy is just like those type of people where you can see like the crazy in their eye, their eyes. He's that type of person where like not to mess with this dude, and he's only about 5'5". No, I wouldn't say that. He's probably about 5'7", and I'm 6'7", 6'8", right? And I'm looking at this guy like this dude is crazy, and he and he would say like he would tell me he was like if you're gonna do this do it like you're gonna do it on the street because this is not to play. Like this, you're not. I mean, it was just he just kind of instilled that into me. It's like just make sure if you're going to hit this person, make sure you hit them in here, so you know what it's going to be like, right? And so I see a lot of classes that I'll just go and take a look at, and people are kind of just going through the motions about things. And I know for a fact that they've never been in an actual fight. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like it does them a disservice to do that and to be that way. And I even a lot of times, even here in Austin, there's not a whole lot of Kajukenbo. I'm in Austin, Texas now. There's not a whole lot of Kajukenbo. There's like 3 or 4 schools maybe coming from the Bay Area where there was Kajukenbo everywhere. It's a huge difference, right? And so I would go into a school and I wouldn't announce who I was or what my rank was or anything. And I would just go and take like the free class just to kind of see what was going on. And one school, a kid was getting ready for his black belt test, and me just watching this kid and going through all the written knowledge that they had, it made me. That's when I it really solidified in me that these people do not understand violence, and I had to tell this kid that, and I was like, because they asked me after a while after training, I was like, okay, this is who I am and this is what I do and blah blah. And afterwards, he was asking me questions, And like I said, I don't care if you ask me something, I'm going to tell you what my thoughts are. And if you get offended by that, I'm sorry, but my thoughts are my thoughts. You don't have to subscribe to them, and you don't have to believe them or anything like that. But I was like, I can tell that you've never been into a fight in a fight before because you don't understand what you're doing. You don't have. To me, it doesn't seem like you have the passion for violence or understand what violence even looks like. So, yes, I see the difference in the way I was taught and the way people are kind of teaching now. Not to say that everybody teaches that way nowadays, but I do see the difference.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that's a question I ask because I haven't been in it a whole. I don't know. It doesn't feel like a long time. I guess depending on how I look at this time estimate, uh, they're probably doing Kajukenbo conservative estimate. I'll say I'll say over 10 years. We'll just say that. We'll say over
Mm-hmm.
maybe 15
Mm-hmm.
years. I started when I was 18 ish because I kind of came on and off, in and out. But I did notice back when I started to maybe a good, I don't know, I guess it was kind of around 5 years back, 5 or 6 years back. A lot of schools were transitioning from when I started. It was like it was good. It was a good program, and I think it had to do with my instructor was running it at the rec set on his own at the dojo, like
Mm-hmm.
his school. And he always told me the way I teach here at my school is different from the way I teach at the rec center because of insurance stuff.
Right.
So like we already had like a distinguishing marker between the rec center programs and the way we would teach, the way he would teach at the school because he didn't have anybody telling him how to do it, or he doesn't have anybody looking over
Mm-hmm.
his shoulder if you know what I mean. So like when he kind of went over back into the rec centers for a while there, he had to close his school and be only at the rec centers. We had to talk about like a lot of the students that came from the dojo. He'd tell us, okay, just be careful, like not be careful, but just remember that
Be aware.
these be aware that these rec center people are different from the way we're doing it at the dojo.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I was aware of and kind of always kept in mind because the dojo was ran in my neighborhood of Escondido where there's a lot of gang violence, and then
Mm-hmm.
the rec center was in the nice neighborhood.
Yeah, that you laugh, but that makes a huge difference. That makes a huge difference. Like just the mentality. So San Leandro is like the nicer areas, right? I'm from Oakland. I grew up in a good area of Oakland, so that doesn't really matter. But when I went to Albuquerque, and I was in the South Valley of Albuquerque, um, every kid there was ready to fight. Like like literally like ready to just scrap like till they couldn't hold their hands up anymore. And when I got back to California and I looked and I'm just like, there's not like that's a mentality. And you
Yeah,
can't really teach that mentality. Um it's it's something different. And I used to tell Ron, I was like, there's that mentality isn't in San Leandro. So, like, you can have somebody that is not to say that there's somebody that's talented in fighting or martial arts and sparring and whatnot, but to be like chomping at the bit, ready to fight, and just be like, just I want to knock this kid's head off. That is a whole different type of kid. So I totally understand what you're saying.
so do you have any like, I don't know, did you have any firsthand experience with this? Because I know you said you observed some classes and you saw some stuff, but is there anything like that? Like, did you ever have an example where you were training with someone who was supposedly of a certain rank and you were kind of expecting them to have some skill that they apparently didn't?
Well, it was more so the long. So again, I left California to be a kickboxer in New Mexico, and I stayed in New Mexico for a while. And then when I came back, like I said, I looked around and I really came back kind of with a chip on my shoulder a little bit because um, because the level of competition with somebody that wants to fight is a lot different from the level of competition with somebody that's here to kind of spar or whatnot. And I'll never forget. Uh, there was a guy that was kind of older, um, and he wanted to spar, and I was like, "You don't want to do that," but okay. And so he, we were going at it, and he came in with something like a soft jab, and I stepped to the side and just cracked him to the ribs. And it was kind of like just bread and butter to what we were doing in Albuquerque, and ended up just getting him right in the kidneys. The dude had to go to the hospital, and his wife hated me for. She's like, I bet she still hates me to this day because she was traded also, and I was just like, what do you want me to do? Like this, I didn't feel like I tagged them that hard, but is we're here to learn how to defend yourself. And if you are not doing that, then what are you here for? You know what I mean? So yeah, in hindsight, I guess I could have taken it a little bit easier on them, but like I said, I had, I really felt like I had a chip on my shoulder because it was just, it was one of those things where I had put in a lot of work and did and went through a lot to get to that level with Chavez, and I come back and these people were kind of being a little bit lazier and a little bit less dedicated and a little bit a little soft around the edges. So it's like I'm just gonna I don't care. So yeah.
No, I mean, I feel the same way. Like I said, I came from a different school from when we moved into the rec center, and even when we moved into the rec center, like I said, there was still that division between the rec center students and the ones that came straight from the dojo. And I
Yeah.
always, every single test I ever had from day one, from when I was a white belt, even from the first day I walked in through the door, uh, at the time I walked in and I challenged the top student, Sifu Mike. At the time he was a brown belt, and he was just so much quicker than me. Like he was tagging me left and
Mm.
right, and he was still being easy about it because I was a white belt. But he was, I was still getting my bell rung here and there. But then after I joined, it was just every time we sparred, he would TKO me. And at the time, I didn't know what a TKO was. Like my idea of what a knockout was like the movies, or like when you watch the UFC and you see a guy get cold knocked out, like where
Yeah.
they pass out and their eyes roll to the back of their head. So I thought, and on the street, that's what I thought a knockout was too. Like, hey, that person can't
Mm.
continue; they're on the floor. But I didn't realize that a knockout could also be when your legs get wobbly and you start seeing double.
Mm.
And like normally in a real fight, the referee would see that, give you a 10 count, and be like, "You're done. You had 10
Yeah.
seconds to see singular again, and you didn't." But in class, it was just
But
like, "Can you continue?" And I'm like, I see three of Sifu Mike's. I'm like, I can still stand. And
yeah.
if he doesn't tag me like that in the next 10 seconds or 20 seconds, I could recover, and I would.
Right.
I would just push myself and continue every time. And if he
But
busts,
as a student, I feel like that's what you should be looking for. Um, and I think that was the chip on my shoulder was that I didn't have anybody to challenge me like that, and it kind of made me a little bit mad that there was nobody to challenge me like that, and I was always the biggest person in the class, right? But when I went to Albuquerque, that wasn't even a factor. You know what I mean? It wasn't even like my roommate at the time. His name was Jose. His name was Jose Ramirez, and he was probably all of maybe 5'11", 160 pounds, and I was 220 pounds at the time, and we would go at it, like go at it, and there was a time like it was such a challenge that I had to raise my skill level. Before I left Albuquerque, for Albuquerque, there was uh, Jeff Macaloloy, and he's this little Filipino dude, not little, but Filipino sized dude, and he was just super quick, and we would spar all the time, and I would have to raise my speed up to be able to spar with this kid, and he would have to figure out how to get in on me. So it was that dynamic that helps you. It's that dynamic that helps you build. And if you're winning all the time, or if you're just beating up everybody all the time, then you're not getting anything out of that. Really, you're just you know the person that you're is probably getting a whole 10 times more out of that session than what you're getting out of it.
Yeah.
So it
Even though they may not feel that
you
way.
challenge, huh?
Even though they may not
What?
understand that at the time.
No, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I didn't understand it at the time until it started happening, and I was like, oh, I learned a lot more, and I'm getting a lot more out of this.
Yeah.
But it shows up. Like you really have to be a student of the game to understand. There's a lot of there are a lot of little what's the word I'm looking for? Little uh little things. I can't even think of the word I'm looking for, but little things that you learn along the way um, that make you level up. And if you don't learn them, like you can go throughout the belt system and not learn these things and be like just the black belt or whatever, or just be a practitioner. But if you learn nuances, that's what I was thinking. If you learn these nuances of like all this stuff is biomechanics or all this, fight the person that's going to teach you something, train like you're going to be like you are going to be using this in the street. Those nuances are what determine the practitioner from the person that embodies it to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And finding that balance between knowing what to work on who. I think that was
Mm-hmm.
my greatest challenge is trying to figure out because I had someone pushing me like that all the time. So
Mm-hmm.
then when I would fight people that were weaker than me, it was trying to find a way to not I mean because I didn't come in thinking I was going to teach. I didn't really realize I was going to be teaching anything until I became a brown belt and it became very apparent. Like, yeah, see, my instructor would have me lead class every so once in a while, but I wasn't really looking at thinking of teaching really till I got closer to brown, and that's when I realized, okay, I'm gonna be teach. It looks like I'm gonna be teaching. So, like, what, what do I want to teach? Like, what am I walking
Yeah.
away with this now? Like, I know I'm at a level where most of these people aren't close, and I have to figure out not only how can I teach them something, but also how can I teach and get something out of it? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a balance that was a challenge at the time. Was trying to figure
Yeah.
out like
Teaching
that
is
for
so
sure.
interesting because I didn't understand this until I started teaching, and I've heard this before. Is that you as the teacher get probably get more out of it than the student gets, and that's another one of those lessons you kind of have to fall into, is where you there's a point in time where you're teaching and there's so many different levels of skill sets, levels of skill in that classroom, and you have to break this down and teach to each student at their level, right? And it makes you, the teacher, become much more proficient at understanding what the technique is or understanding what the concept is versus, just learning it. And that I think is much more important than being able to do the technique. One of my instructors that Ron brought into the school, Sensei Chris, he like imparted on the students that he taught. He was like, I can teach you technique or I can teach you concepts. And technique is do this, 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 and this, but the concept is this. And the concept will always work, whereas the technique doesn't necessarily work because that person might be bigger, shorter, smaller, fatter, or whatever, you know what I mean? And so once you understand the concept, you can devise 10, 15, 20 techniques off of that one concept. So understanding that concept, I think, makes you a better teacher and helps you to teach a lot more.
That's really interesting because, like, one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast, this Kajukenbo series in particular, is looking for not just narratives from what many other instructors say, but also linking these narratives to narratives that I hear when I'm cross training. It's like right now I've been cross training with gi jujitsu guys because I've done jujitsu for a long time, but not gi jujitsu
Mm.
with these Japanese guys over here at Gracie Barra, and they had a seminar where they had this professor come out from London. He's some Abu Dhabi champion, whatnot. But he mentioned the same exact thing. He didn't say concept, but he said principles, like the idea of
Mm.
I can show you an armbar. I can show you how to escape from a full mount, but you will only be able to do this one move, this one technique to be able to escape it. But if you understand the principles of where your body should be, where your hands should be, how you should be controlling the gi in this particular position, and how not just the position, but the idea that we're trying to put pressure on this side of the body. If you can understand the
Right.
principle, then at that point the you can use multiple escapes. Like he showed us like here's this one escape, but this escape is based on this principle, and here's like these 8 escapes that are based on this one principle. If you
Hmm.
understand it, so yeah, that's again like
Yeah.
I'm big on this because of my academic background. I'm always looking at the idea that if something is true in one arena and it's true in another arena, then now we're starting to go away from a hypothesis and more towards a theory, which is pretty cool.
Right. What I find interesting is so like I said, my transition from Kajukenbo to like Muay Thai, there was always a an instructor that wanted to come and show me something or other, right? And there's a lot of nonsense out there. A whole lot of nonsense out there, right? But I started to disseminate the difference because the ones that knew what they were talking about were all saying the same things, but they might be saying, something a tad bit like, put your foot here instead of here, but this is what you're trying to achieve, right? And so that way it gave me kind of this rubric to understand who I should be listening to. And then I would take that all back to to Chavez and be like, hey, what do you think of this and this and this and this? And he would be like, yeah, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. But for me, it's it's because of the size that my size that makes me have to go and ask and find out like what the concepts were that work for me, because if somebody's trying to tell me how to get inside or how to stay on the outside and they don't have the same challenges that I have, then you know is it viable for me to do this? Does it make sense for me to try this? And of course I try it, but there's I have to find my own path, so to speak.
And I think that's kind of touching on the idea of that. We always say that mind, body, spirit, right?
Hmm.
And this martial arts. There's like the martial element, and then there's really is that art element, that philosophy, like understanding the philosophy behind stuff. I think is really important to be able to find that for yourself.
Hmm.
And I don't know, maybe people
Yeah,
that don't do martial arts, I've totally lost them on this one, but like,
I mean, there are some things that you have to kind of experience to understand. So, hey, get in the gym. If you don't understand it, go train till you do.
So,
What can you do?
kind of moving on to the one of the other questions I sent you over was how has uh, how has Kajukenbo or your martial arts training helped you outside of the dojo, outside of martial arts?
um, I would say just confidence wise. Uh, like I said, when I this sounds bad and it sounds like just pompous or whatever, but hey, whatever. When I when I told you I don't really care what people if people get offended or not. The rest of that is because they're not going to beat me up. Like they can't beat me up, so that's the rest of that saying. So that part. um, but for there is a confidence level and there is a respect level that I think exudes from me because of the things that I've been through in martial arts and the things that I can do in martial arts. And people, it's funny because people will look at me and talk to me and not know that I was a amateur kickboxing champion or that I have a 6 degree black belt because I don't have to throw anything in. Like I don't have to posture and pretend like I am the meanest person in the room or just the what I'm saying, just the baddest person in the room, even though I don't consider myself to be ever. Um, but they'll think if I tell them I was like, yeah, I used to kickbox and all this other stuff, they're like, no, you really? I could not imagine that at all. And I'm like, yeah, well, it's true. So that whole way you carry yourself it feels a little different because of the respect level that you have for yourself and that you have for the arts and that you have for especially the idea that you never know who knows what. And so it just it there's just a respect level there, and I think that is the biggest thing that I take outside the dojo when I leave the floor. Um, yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing.
And what do you what do you think? And it's gonna be like switching gears here real quick.
Hmm.
What do you think about MMA blowing up and making martial arts training popular?
I think it's a double-edged sword in that um, it's like Spider-Man with great power comes great responsibility, and that whole respect thing needs to be there. Um, and that's kind of cliche to say, and I feel bad for kind of being that cliche, but there's a difference between a fighter and a martial artist, and if you don't have the respect, not saying that people don't have the respect, but at some level, MMA I feel like has lost the art part of it, and is trying to churn out these fighters because there's a difference between a boxing gym and a martial arts dojo, right? And I think that MMA has turned the dojo into a boxing gym a little bit. Um, Not to say that they aren't great fighters and amazing athletes, but I feel like there needs to be some tradition in there and not just I'm going to knock your head off and wear like the latest gear, which they don't really. I mean, that era has kind of passed a little bit, but
Yeah, now Reebok is kind of taking over that whole that
yeah,
whole industry.
that's probably a blessing and a curse. I don't know,
Yeah,
but you know what I mean. It's like that whole. At one point, it was like I have an affliction shirt or a tap out shirt,
tap out
and
the
I'm
tap
the
out shirt. I think
yeah
was the real like.
yeah
Chat, like I see it with the tap out shirt, and I'd be like, there's like a 20% chance that this person actually knows how to fight, and there's a good 80% chance that this person just likes to talk a lot of shit
right
and watch a lot of UFC.
yeah. I mean, I I I like the fact that it opened up the the world of martial arts to people, but again, how much how much of that is like the traditional sense of the word, and how much of it is I'm just going to try and knock somebody's block off.
Yeah,
So,
and
I mean, go ahead.
no, and I think this goes back to that balance we were talking about earlier, right? And that's a great
Mhm.
answer to the question because I think maybe some folks listening to us talk right now, we go back if we rewind back earlier in our conversation about how we always felt that there needed to be this urgency for real fighting in the training, right? Real fighting,
Mhm.
having that hard style and looking at people who didn't have that as they need to have that, but still at the same time knowing when to tone it back and be balanced, not just be all about there to hurt someone else.
Well, MMA isn't real. Like it's still there's still rules there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
So um, I don't even really want to bring this up, but
You can't. It's
so
up
the
to
whole
you. It's up to you.
no the whole it was just to my point. I think it's funny about it, but the whole Fight Quest thing, right, with Jimmy Smith and him being an MMA fighter in a Kajukenbo school, right? And so I called the elbow heard around the world. So I was the one that hit Jimmy Smith with the elbow, right? And it was because he shot in on me. And this dude, again, I'm 6'8", probably I was probably 275 at the time, and this dude is shooting in and trying to take my legs, right? Because he's a jujitsu guy and he has rules, and those rules are ingrained in him that I'm not going to hit him while he's shooting in on me. But those aren't our rules, right? And so those rules got him into a situation where he could have been killed had I, really tried to hurt him. And so MMA is still a sport and still rules driven. Siga, or I guess he's Grandmaster Bautista, Joseph Bautista. He used to do the self defense um, contest in the tournaments, and one of his routines was he bit this guy's groin. He bit the guy in the groin, and
Oh, shit.
yeah, so show me where that's in the rules. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, we don't have a rule for that, so I don't know how we're gonna score that. But so I'm just saying, like that mentality is very far removed from the octagon. You know what I'm saying? And so you shooting in on me, yeah, I'm gonna hit you on the back in the back. Your spine is right there. I'm going to stop you from trying to hurt me. Like that's the rule,
Yeah,
you
and I
know.
think I
So
believe for those people who are watching or listening and don't know about it, check out Fight Quest, Kajukenbo, Google it. You'll see a bunch of stuff, YouTube and whatnot, and you'll be able to see this fight, so you can kind of have an idea of what's going on. I can't put it on here because I'll get my show pulled off YouTube for that. But
yeah,
um, I believe it was a drop elbow, right? Like
yeah,
it wasn't like I have the cameras here so they can see what I'm doing. It wasn't like the Muay Thai elbow where you come in and you're hitting with the outside. You did like a drop elbow from the top to bottom.
Right.
Muay Thai has it. Muay Thai actually does have this move. It's legal. You can jump up, bring your top of your elbow and bring it down your opponent's head or wherever you want.
Mm-hmm.
But in the UFC, they've made that drop elbow illegal.
Right. And it's something we practice consistently. It's in a lot of our punch arts.
Yeah.
And so, it's
It's not even as
what are you going
extreme
to do
as
to go home?
biting. I mean, it's not even as extreme as biting someone in the groin. It's just a
Yeah.
drop elbow.
That was for dramatic effect, I'm sure. That couldn't have tasted good. That couldn't have tasted good.
Yeah, I gonna have to get some really strong, potent mouthwash for that one later.
Yeah. We were all shocked at that. No, do not mess with that guy.
So, kind of coming towards the end of our podcast, of our interview here. What are your plans for the future? What are you doing right now? I know you mentioned I think you mentioned earlier to me that you're doing your thing, but what are your plans? I guess I know you're not running a school right now, right? You're just training.
No.
And what are your plans for the
So,
future? What do you want to do? Not just this. And this question isn't limited to martial arts. Like this is more about what are you doing in your personal life, business wise, or that kind of stuff.
uh-huh.
What do you
Well,
want to see for yourself?
I'm a photographer here in Austin. I have a photography company, Eric Coleman Photography, and I run that. But as far as for martial arts, um, I am on the board of the KAA, Kajukenbo Association of America. So I don't have a school, and I was having a conversation with Ron Steller and Chavez about. They basically kind of guilted me into this a little bit, but they were kind of saying that the people that were my seniors are aging out, right? And they are. It's time for the newer people or the next generation, kind of step up and take the reins and to push this KAA association forward. And so I kind of took that to heart and joined the board. And right now we are in a rebranding and a rebuilding period, and trying to, get the Gaylord method more solidified and the association more solidified. And so I've been putting a lot of effort into that because there's a lot of ways that you can give back, right? It's not just about teaching, and it's not just about teaching or bringing the next generation up. In order to survive, you have to have an infrastructure, and you have to invite people into this infrastructure and grow this association. So that's where I'm at right now, is how do we continue to keep this thing alive and can you keep the memory of Gaylord alive and help the association grow.
And I mean, I don't have this question written down, but I guess this kind of brings us a little bit with the last question with the MMA, how MMA is like a double-edged sword, and a lot of this comes up with the differences between. I mean, Kajukenbo is MMA and it isn't, and it's really hard for me to describe this to people all the time. Like in the States, in Japan, it's even more difficult because they actually do have like really traditional arts like karate, shotokan, kyokushin.
Yeah.
Kyokushin is actually really popular in my area, and then there's the kickboxing and stuff. But like, it's really hard to explain to people in Japan. I guess I'll from my experience in Japan. Hey, we are a traditional, non-traditional, and I have to use the Japanese word called Sogo Kakutogi, which literally translates to mixed martial art. And then most of them don't know what MMA is, so then they look up Sogo Kakutogi, which brings up a bunch of cage fighting, and I'm like, that's part of it.
Yeah.
There's a sport element, and that's the sport element, but still what we're doing here is different from that. And you'll see if you step into my class and I show you punch number 1, you're going to see some MMA elements in the first 3 moves. No, actually, no. Maybe the first move, but once we get to the second move and I'm hitting you in the groin, like now we're we're moving away.
Yeah.
We are now moving away from that sport element. So like you're talking about you're a part of this association, and part of that association is trying to keep a legacy going, right? And that's something that is kind of, I guess, what would you say? And this is good. That's why I'm leading to this question, and you can take it how you want it. Um, what would you say is necessary in order for a martial art to not just be a gym, not just be an MMA gym, not just be one
Mhm.
type of like just all about fighting? How what are some things that you feel help preserve an actual legacy, like actually preserve a system, if you will, or an approach that can be turned into a curriculum to help
Mhm.
others, to make sure that you're all kind of doing, if not the same thing, similar enough that if these two people meet, they can tell they're from the same school. What are some things, some elements that you feel are important for that?
Uh, Off the top of my head, the eight mental aims for Kajukenbo, right? The fact that you said earlier, mind, body, and spirit. Those types of things. It's the mental aspect of it. The physical aspect of it is kind of the same. It's all body mechanics, right? But the mental aspect of it then it's something different. It becomes a different animal. Um, I don't know if you do it in your school, but starting off with the Kajukenbo prayer, and those type of things, those traditions are there for a reason, and it's not to not to create this monster, so to speak. It's to cultivate. Um, my instructor used to. I don't know if this was actually a Genghis Khan or a quote, but he would say something to the effect of "Make savage the body, but civilize the mind." Right, and I think that is the key into not having that gym or into having this dojo. Um, you we are here to tear down the body and build it up, but we are also here to tear down the mind and build it up. And with that comes the respect factor. With that becomes the patience, perseverance, and all these mental aims that we have in Kajukenbo. Um, and if you drill that into the person, we are not here to we are here to protect ourselves and our loved ones from dangers that are forced upon us. If you drill those aspects of this into it, then you create a martial artist and not just a fighter.
That makes sense. No, yeah, I think that's, yeah, that's a really good approach to it. That is a really good approach to it. That's what I would hope. Even if you're not doing Kajukenbo, I'd hope that's what people are trying to cultivate.
Right.
Well, Eric, that pretty much covers everything that I sent over to you, and more, and then some. And I really appreciate you taking the time out of your life to share your thoughts and your philosophies with my listeners. Um, I guess, is there anything you want to share? Any type of promotional stuff that you have that you want to let anybody know on the internet?
No, not really. I think
All right,
pretty
cool,
good.
cool, cool. All right. Well, for my listeners, one more time, thanks again, Eric, for being on the show. And for my listeners, stay tuned for the wrap up.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
No problem. So, that's a wrap. Thanks again for listening to Social Gelo with Angelo. I don't have many events coming up right now that I know of. But again, if you stuck around this long, if you like what you heard, this is part of the Kajukenbo series. And I cover a lot of topics actually, not just martial arts, but also surfing, as I mentioned in the intro, and some social science stuff. But if you are interested just in the Kajukenbo series, that's totally cool. I always label them called Kajukenbo series, and that's where I interview any Kajukenbo practitioners. I do have a lot of great interviews in the woodworks right now. Hopefully some big names. I don't want to drop any big names now, but I will let you know that I am working on some bigger interviews. if you're a Kajukenbo practitioner, or even if you're not, maybe you're just a martial artist, or you're in some sort of field that you're interested, that you've been doing for a long time, and you want to share your story, feel free to contact me at thesocialgelo@gmail.com. All right, thanks for listening. Catch y'all later.
I don't care what they say if you want to just start. I don't want to just step back and say I know back. It just seems you want to judge me. I don't really know that I didn't write the song for you. I didn't write the song for you. I just wanna be an anti-racist fucking punk.